Hello, is this Josh?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Not too bad, not too bad. Just hanging out and in the heat and fire and everything else going on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Now you're out in California, so is the fires near you at all, or?
Yeah, they're about 40 miles away from us.
Oh man, uh, I'm sure you keep a keen eye on that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the city, we're in Sacramento, so it's not too much of a worry, but
Sure.
it stops us from being able to really go out and, go for bike rides and stuff like that and kind of stay active outside, which sucks.
Yeah, that's kind of like Wisconsin with our winters. So
Yeah.
nothing like fires though. So I guess it is the season though. How's quarantine treating you? They loosen things up out there yet, or?
Not really. I mean, they did for
Yeah.
like a week or two or something like that, but now it's pretty much back to where it was. Can't really
Yeah.
go anywhere, do anything, all that kind of stuff. Some stuff's open, some restaurants are open, and some
Mhm.
bars are open and stuff like that. But you have to sit outside, and who really wants to sit outside in 115-degree heat? I'm like,
I guess that's the one thing here is the temperatures actually have been really nice, so sitting outside isn't too bad here, and we don't get too many days like that around here. So before it starts getting cold again. So
you guys don't really
uh,
get too bad humidity, right?
uh, in July for a while, like for a week or two, we've had it where it gets just like oppressive to where you walk outside your door and you feel like you're swimming. But usually it doesn't last that long. Maybe
Yeah.
a week or two at most. At least in a couple recent years, we do every 2 3 years get like a major severe storm that just annihilates everything. But um,
I do not. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, and I do not miss the snow at all.
so okay, yeah, you are familiar with long hard winters then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I don't blame you going out to California then. Uh,
Yeah, California has its I love Northern California just because
mhm.
of the fact, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot outside that you can do.
Sure.
It reminds me a lot of living in Pennsylvania and, being able to go up the mountain and stuff like that. But, it's starting to get to a point now where taxes are super high
Hmm.
and everything else. And, the state's on fire right now. And
Yeah.
it's just with everything going on, it's me and my fiance Courtney. We really thought about getting out of here and going back to the East Coast, but we'll see. We'll see how things pan out.
Well, I mean, they're making movies everywhere now, so
Yeah,
you can definitely go to the East Coast or even here in the Midwest. Though, yeah, you may want to go a little bit south so you avoid not as much long winters. But but speaking of filmmaking, you've got your new film "Where Sleeping Dogs Lie," which is what I wanted to shoot talk to you about today a little bit and. Just let people know about this film that I had the pleasure of seeing a screener of, and it impressed me quite a bit. So, why don't you, if you don't mind, I always like doing this with the directors, if you could just give my listeners the synopsis in your words of what Where Sleeping Dogs Lie is about.
sure. Where Sleeping Dogs Lie is about two brothers and their best friend that end up getting into a heap of trouble. Basically, they attempt to go up into the mountains and rob a rich guy. Uh, and it kind of all just snowballs out of control at that point. There are some other pieces to it, obviously, that keep the story driving forward
Mhm.
and kind of get them into the trouble that they weren't expecting. But that's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, it's I what caught me because it's categorized as a crime action drama, and especially for crime dramas, it's watching a lot of indie films. I find that it's sometimes tough to pull it off. And execute well because you get either like long expositions in that. But could you tell me what was your process with your approach to making Where Sleeping Dogs Live? Because you move this film through pretty quick. I mean,
Mhm.
it stays at a nice steady pace. Was that part of your planning, trying to make sure that you kept the pacing well? What was the process with that?
It's funny. I I like slow burns.
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of a good slow, especially when it's crime
Sure.
or something like Drive,
Hmm.
which is amazing, and I love how slow it is, but also how paced out it is.
Hmm.
Um, and like Neon Demon is another one that's similar
Yeah.
to that.
Hmm.
I just I usually really like them, but
Hmm.
what ended up happening with this thing, and obviously it's an independent film, so it's one of those funny things where you know, uh, you shoot and you shoot and you shoot and you shoot and you get it all in the can, and then we get back to editing, and there's a whole scene that's missing that's like 15 minutes long because it just I kept going back to the scene, and it just slowed down the pace of the movie, and I felt
Hmm.
like when I wrote it, and I'm gonna jump all over the place here probably,
No,
so
that's fine. Yeah, by all means, by all means, I do that all the time. So don't worry.
But when I wrote it, it was like in my head, I
Hmm.
had the all these conversations were supposed to move really slow, and it was supposed to be methodical. And what ended up happening after we cast it and started going through all the the read throughs and stuff like that, it we started finding that there was actually a lot of comedy in it.
Hmm.
And when I was writing it, I didn't see that comedy, but when people read it, so like when my fiance read it, she's also one of the producers on it and did a bunch of work on it. When she read it, she was laughing at some parts, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's not supposed to be funny. But I think that goes hand in hand with like the movies that I grew up with, though,
Hmm.
to some degree, and what have inspired me over the years. I mean, and we can go into that later, but when I started seeing the comedy aspect
Hmm.
come out in it and how quick some of the scenes came together, I was trying to in editing, I was trying to ebb and flow it, right? So I was
Hmm.
trying to make it to where it was you'd have something really quick happen, and it would be gruesome and in your face and aggressive, but then I wanted to slow that pace down and really try and focus in on the suspense that's supposed to be happening here too, and like the thriller aspect of it. Um, so it was just kind of a game of chess, I think, in some ways when I was editing it,
Hmm.
and having multiple people watch it over and over and over and over and over and over again and tell me what wasn't working, what was working. Not having the ability to be able to pull in critics and things like that at the time to really take a look at it and really give good feedback. It was really relying on just friends
Hmm.
and some other filmmakers and stuff like that to come in and really help me through that process.
And you can tell that actually pays off because I know I've run across some indie films to where you're watching it going, man, this is enjoyable, but they really needed someone to watch this to tell them what to cut out. So I like to hear that you had a lot of people watch it because some filmmakers don't. I mean, it's very personal. I meant the project's personal to you and that, and so it's tough to give that to someone else and then get that constructive feedback because I'm sure you want to put so much more into it, but I guess it's what the viewers want, more so than maybe what you want. Did you have to make some tough editing choices then when you were doing that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was there were definitely some scenes and some shots and things like that that
Hmm.
I definitely held my ground, and I was like, look, I'm not getting rid of this. This is not happening. Like, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember what those scenes were, or what those shots
Hmm.
were anymore, because it was a while ago. But
Sure.
it was, there's definitely that give and take that has to happen there, and you have to do it in, especially if you're the director and the writer and you're editing it too,
Hmm.
which I would never put on anybody. There are definitely you really have to make some hard choices with yourself,
Right.
uh, and but at the end of the day, one of those things, a lot of the times I would look at it and I would say, okay, well, is it really paramount to the story? Like, is it
Hmm.
driving the story forward, or is it just like conjecture? Is it just sitting there doing absolutely nothing and it has
Hmm.
no point to be here? Which is really what happened with the one scene that I had to cut. And there was a whole dealership scene
Hmm.
with the character of Barry, and you see some of where he was coming from, like
Hmm.
what really drove him out of that dealership, like how he
Right.
got fired and all that kind of stuff. And some of the crap that he has to deal with from his coworkers and that. And I love the idea of that scene,
Hmm.
but and how I wrote it. I love the dialogue. I think it's really great for his character. But at the end of the day, it slowed down the pace of the movie, and it also ended up not doing anything to drive that story forward. So it was 15 minutes of just it just killed it, like just killed the
Right.
momentum.
Yeah, and because I could see that, and that would be interesting. But I think you get a lot of, at least I got a lot of impression of what type of person Barry was with what you left in there. So, but it was definitely an interesting character. In fact, all your characters I found uh, had a great separation between them because each one did feel different. Because sometimes in films like this, you can see where they actually all feel the same. Or
Yeah.
did you pull from real people's experience at all, or people you've met that to go into these characters?
Um, it's kind of funny actually. Oh, there we go. Get some
Oh.
brightness for a second. I should see my face. Um, it's funny. I So in my writing process with this one, I wrote the opening scene, the opening dialogue scene in the
Hmm.
diner. I wrote that, God, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that
Wow.
now,
Okay.
and just that scene. And I had come home after watching Drive, I
Hmm.
think it was, and I just had I don't know why, but like there was something about this character, and I don't know where the character of Jeff even came from in my head, but it, I just there was like this dripping like of sarcasm and disdain for like everything that was going on, and I don't know what happened. I don't know where my head was at that night, but I just had to get that scene out of me, right?
Sure.
So I didn't know what I was going to use it for, but and I do that a lot where I'll just write something
Hmm.
and just store it away, and maybe I'll come back to it, maybe I won't, and ended up coming back to it. But I wrote that, and then I really liked that character a lot, but I didn't know what to do with him.
Hmm.
I didn't know where to go with him. I didn't know what his story was. I just wrote this random scene. And I actually originally thought about shooting just that scene as like a short film type of
Hmm.
thing, and adding some characters into it and stuff like that, and just leaving it in the diner for 10 minutes or
Hmm.
something. But it just kind of sat. And then I don't remember where I saw another character, and I can't remember who it was. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Barry, I felt like he, I felt like Jeff really needed to be grounded,
Hmm.
and I felt like Barry did that. Don't really know where he came from. I love the idea of brothers. I didn't grow up with any brothers. I was an only child, but I like the idea of brothers or sisters, and people keeping each other in check
Hmm.
and grounded and things like that, and they get in trouble together. Because at the end of the day, like I always felt like you're going to do whatever you can to save your brother, right? To
Right.
make sure that he's okay, or sister for that matter,
Mm.
So I always liked that idea. And then the friend of Tim, like he just, I I felt like we needed another force to drive that story a little bit
Hmm.
more and to get them into trouble. And at first, he started out as like just an extra character, and then I had a whole other scene with him too, where he picks up Jeff in the beginning,
Hmm.
and you get to know him, that character a little bit too. And ended up getting rid of that scene because it just didn't work right. It didn't look good. It didn't sound good. Everything. Um, but I felt like that character of Tim really helped um, see the emotional side of
Hmm.
Jeff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's good you gave Jeff a little bit of emotion because, in all honesty, when you first meet him, pardon my French, he comes off as a dick. He's a jerk, kind of a jerk type character, but he warmed up to be a little bit, he warmed up a little bit as you learn more about him. But yeah, I found the dynamic between those three very interesting, and actually the world too. How much thought did you put into this kind of underworld? Because this whole thing feels kind of like the noir feel, where you never quite leave the gutter. You're kind of above the gut, but you're never. No one in here really feels truly redeemable. Was what went into that in creating that world that these characters live in?
Um, going back to Drive,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I love about all of his movies.
Yeah.
That they do kind of live in that world where nobody's really good,
Hmm.
and I really gravitate to that stuff, and I always have my whole life.
Hmm.
You watch Casino or Mean Streets and all that kind of stuff back in the 70s and 80s, and even Taxi Driver.
Hmm.
It's those movies just don't have redeemable characters really. Like they have aspects of redeemable characters and worlds that they live in, but for the most part, they're just dirty and nasty. And I always gravitate to that, and I really
Hmm.
don't know why. But I think it might be because it's I know what a good world looks like. I know
Sure.
what my life looks like. I know
Hmm.
what with my daughter and my fiance, and we own a house, and we have good jobs and all this
Hmm.
stuff, and I know what that looks like. But there's something about being able to create a world and characters that may or may not exist.
Hmm.
I think that's just really special, and it gives you room to be able to kind of do whatever you want with those worlds.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, that yeah.
I just love.
No, I can understand that. It kind of gives you some freedom because you don't really have any moral compass for anybody.
Yeah,
You can get put them in whatever situation you want.
look at Reservoir Dogs.
Hmm.
It's Tim Roth's character. When it comes out that that he's the cop or whatever, you still don't really even like him. Like he's supposed to be this good guy at the end of this whole thing, but you still don't really like him.
Yeah, you mentioned Reservoir Dogs. I will say this kind of felt like it had some Tarantino spirit to it. Was that one of the influences? You mentioned Drive too. What other things had kind of influenced you when you were writing this?
I think Tarantino is always in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
What I'm 38 years old, and when I was 10 years old is when Pulp Fiction came out.
Sure.
And so funny story there, and then I'll go back into it.
No, yeah, go ahead.
But when Pulp Fiction came out, like I said, I was 10 years old, and this was back in the day when you had to call in on pay-per-view to
Hmm.
be able to order something. And my parents were both gone,
Sure.
so I'm sitting at the house, and so I'm like, okay, I want to see this movie. Like I have to see this thing,
Hmm.
and I had heard so much about it, and I was like, I gotta see it. So I ended up calling and ordering it. And about halfway through the movie, I'm sitting there going during the Ving Rhames rape
Oh,
scene,
sure, yeah.
and I'm sitting there going, I probably shouldn't be watching this, but but again, such a great underbelly
Hmm.
world that Tarantino created, and it also showed me as a young writer because I've been writing my as long as I can remember. I've been writing,
Hmm.
but short stories and long form and all kinds of stuff. But what that did for me as a young writer is tell me and show me a different way to write. So
Hmm.
being able to write out of sequence and have it make sense. Um, and I love that idea. But then go to like Reservoir Dogs,
Hmm.
where I think that Reservoir Dogs and Hateful Eight both. I think what Tarantino did so well is challenge himself on being able to stay within, well, especially Reservoir Dogs, stay within budget for one thing, but
Yeah.
also, shoot in one location for the most part, right?
Hmm.
I mean, if the 80% of your movie's in one location, you're going to save a ton of money on budget and time.
Right.
And that was always in the back of my mind because I knew that I wanted to make the jump from short films to feature,
Hmm.
but I wasn't gonna do it lightly. And I knew we didn't have a whole lot of money, so I was like, okay, well, what can I do to make it limited locations,
Hmm.
limited cast, limited crew, but still make it as high quality as we think we could achieve without a budget, right?
Right.
Without a good budget.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where it started. And then I started kind of, piecing it all together. And I had these random characters. So I had the character of Barry and this this guy that just goes off the deep end, but I didn't know what to do with him.
Hmm.
So then I started pairing him with Jeff, and I really liked that idea, both of those guys together, and started kind of just we're weeding it out that way, and it just started working itself out. Um, but I knew that I had to do it in like majorly one location because of the money aspect. And you know, I'm glad we did,
Hmm.
because had we had more characters and had more locations with the amount of budget that we had, it wouldn't have come out looking the way that it did. It wouldn't have
Right.
come out. I think we would have. I think we would have lost some quality.
And it does work within the story that you have. Now, the location you did pick, I love that house. That's a really big house. Did you know someone with the house that big, or did you do some location shooting, hunting for it, or?
So Courtney, my fiance, she actually she knows the guy. So the guy that owns it
Hmm.
is his name's John, and he was actually he's an actor too,
Hmm.
but him and his wife are an older couple, and I think they're both retired, and they're both in the arts. He's an actor, and she's a cellist
Oh,
for the
okay.
San Jose Symphony, I think.
Hmm.
And so they're always doing odd hour things and stuff like that. But the house actually is not as big as I make it seem, and that was on purpose,
Hmm.
because we knew that we had these weird corridors and things like that were going places, and I wanted the house to seem bigger than it really was. So the main room itself is 30 feet high of windows,
Sure.
so which is its own problem right there,
Right.
because when we're shooting, it's like we're like trying to place the camera in sections where the like in between the windows so you can't
Sure.
see it. Because the last thing we wanted to do in editing was have to go back through and try to pull that stuff
Right.
out in post. Um, and lights were the same problem, because
Hmm.
we had lights shooting all over the place, and then it was like going into windows, and it was a mess. But what we did specifically was, if you notice, I never have the characters going down hallways.
Hmm.
I never have them do. The only time that they ever do anything like that is going up and down the stairs from the kitchen
Right.
to the living room. And I mean, that's all on purpose,
Hmm.
because then it would have shown the size of the house. Yeah, it is a big house, but it's not like
Right.
it's a mansion. In my head, though, when I originally wrote it, I originally thought mansion type of house in the woods, all this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, we got this house, and it just worked. But
Right.
the back of the house drops, and there's like I mean, it was probably 100 foot like ravine right behind
Sure.
it. So in the scene where Jillian she gets away,
Right.
we had to like place her funky and weird places, and it was just a mess, but it worked.
It worked, but with all that windows, that night shoot probably helped a little bit with that too. Then, right? Shooting at night.
So that was the whole thing. We all worked day jobs too.
Sure.
So we're shooting Friday and Saturday evenings, and Sundays during the day, and
Mhm.
sometimes Saturdays during the day too. So a lot of us weren't sleeping, and it was all because of the windows, and we couldn't
Right.
black them out because we didn't have enough budget to. It was like, okay, do we feed people at 3 o'clock in the morning, or do we black these windows out? And we just didn't have the budget, so it was like, all right, I guess we're shooting at night, and we're gonna
Hmm.
feed people.
The challenges of indie filmmaking, I don't think people realize, because one of the things that I enjoyed about it too, though, is I knew you were working on a limited budget, being an indie production, but it didn't have a lot of the aesthetics that you run into that I noticed in it. So you could tell you used it well, but yeah, you make those decisions of feed the crew for the day, or you know rent a red, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
And
now,
at the end
go
at
ahead.
the end of the day, we made decisions, like camera decisions, right?
Right.
It was I knew that I wanted this thing to have like a 70s, 80s kind
Hmm.
of look to it. You notice there's no cell phones anywhere in it.
Yep.
I The only place that you would even notice that it takes place kind of current day is in the
Hmm.
diner, when you see cars pass by in the background, and that's it. all of it was purposeful. I mean, all the set design, everything was purposeful. All the way that they're dressed, the fact that they're, the lawyer, the way he's dressed too. Courtney did such. She did all of that set design and all the wardrobe too,
Oh, okay.
and she gave it the look
Hmm.
that I really wanted out of it. Their Cadillac, the car that they drive, it's all the same thing. I really wanted to make sure that it played well together. And the thing is that camera choice was, okay, well, we don't have the budget to go rent a red or an Airy or something like
Right.
that. So we've got this Black Magics,
Hmm.
and we knew the limitations of the Black Magics. We knew that how they acted in low light. And so we knew how much light we needed to get away with and all those types of things. But it also gave us this graininess that almost looks like film.
Hmm.
And so I was like, all right, cool. Just played well together.
Added bonus, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I miss film grain on a lot of films. Yeah, I mean, people don't realize it, but well, you mentioned it. Growing up in the '90s, and I'm a little bit older. I grew up growing up in the '80s. That you do kind of miss that film grain aesthetic. I think it adds a little something to it. So,
Yeah.
plus, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. It was funny because when we were getting it colored too,
Hmm.
because I didn't color it, we had a good friend of ours. At the time he was working for Warner Brothers, so he was able to take it in there, and which was a really cool experience to begin with. But one of the first things he says to us is, "I feel like this thing needs more grain." So he added more grain.
Well, it adds to the grittiness of the whole subject matter and the world that you have. I think, and I thought the aesthetic worked well, the graininess of it, because it did give that not only '70s feel, but that kind of older school crime drama, like you mentioned, Reservoir Dogs, and that. I think it added to it as well and gave it a little bit more character. Some of the character I like too is I've got to ask the diner scene, the editing, the close up on the chewing. That got me. The way you broke up that scene, did you have that planned out, or was that how you wanted that edited? Because it's like I'm watching it, all of a sudden I see this really close up of him chewing, and I'm like, I'm finding this fascinating, but also oddly fascinating.
Well, I did that on purpose.
Uh-huh.
I always imagined opening a movie
Hmm.
with just like this uncomfortable feeling, right? You
Hmm.
all right off the bat, it's just uncomfortable. And along with what he's saying and how he's like spewing it out of his mouth. And it's funny, the story there is we did a test shoot
Hmm.
basically, and to test our lighting and everything like that. And it was basically used as a rehearsal.
Sure.
And we shot that, and it was awesome. Like the first time we did it, it was awesome. And I'll never forget, like, Jesse, the guy who plays Jeff. He was just like literally spewing things out of his mouth as he was talking. So the food was just coming out of his mouth, and it was just perfectly this perfect combination. Um, but we ended up not being able to use it because we went back and we reshot all that stuff.
Hmm.
But it was I always wanted to use that particular one. The problem was that we ended up losing some audio,
Oh, sure.
and I don't remember why. I think we had a card burn up or something like that
Hmm.
because it was really hot that day because we were shooting. It was like 100 degrees inside, and those Black Magics, along with we lost a full terabyte card too one
Ooh.
day. Um, and it was just, man, it was rough. But we lost an audio card and not being able to use it. I still have that footage, and it still looks amazing. It is what it is.
Get some ADR. There you go, right? Fix it in
And
post.
ADR, I will never like. I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. Like it, there's two sections of the movie that are
Hmm.
ADR'd.
Hmm.
One of them actually came out really good because the both post sound guys that I used, they did a lot of work with the score as well
Hmm.
as just all the other sounds going on around it, where you really can't tell that it's ADR, which was really good. But it's because it's the scene where Barry comes down and gets in front of Bob
Hmm.
and is nicely trying to talk to him at that
Right.
point. That entire scene is all ADR.
Oh, okay.
Um, I mean, it was a lot.
Hmm.
And then the other one was with the neighbor,
Okay.
and that you can tell. You can
Right.
hear it in two lines, I think, that she has. You can hear it. And there was just nothing we could do about it. And it is what it is, and it bugs me every time. But
Things that you notice for sure that I'm sure maybe some other people don't, but
yeah,
you being involved in it, yeah. You mentioned the neighbor. There are those moments, and you alluded to it earlier that the humor that you had in here. I think it worked well in here for me to help break things up. Is that why you left some of it in? Because you mentioned you wanted it more dramatic, but it felt like it broke something because you went to some dark places later, in
yeah.
here. But then you have kind of the black humor that we're used to seeing in crime dramas like that. So is that why you left some of that in there? Or
I think I left it in just
Mhm.
because it was. Uh, I find comedy in uh, and when people don't know what the hell they're doing. So, like, I felt a lot of the times when we were filming, I felt like, and when I was writing it too, it
Mhm.
was if I were to go rob this guy,
Right.
what would I think that I would get myself in trouble with? Like, where would I end up? And then when it came down to editing it, it was all those same things kind of came up. Like
Mhm.
when Barry is in the kitchen with Jeff and he tells him, at some point we're gonna have to figure out what to do with the other two down there. Like it, it's serious, but at the same time, it's comedic because
Mhm.
these guys don't have a clue what they're doing,
Right.
and they didn't prepare themselves for any of this.
Mhm.
And I think that's very kind of like Fargo-ish in a lot of ways too. Um, yeah,
Well, I thought it gave balance, and it's not like it was completely slapstick like Keystone or
yeah.
anything that took it out. It felt natural within in the world that you had here. Now you've got a great cast. I love the cast, even down to I. In all honesty, I wanted to see more of the bunny character. I really like that. So, if you ever do a spin-off movie with Bunny, I'd love to see it. But for the casting, did you have people in mind when you chose this? Some friends, or did you do a casting calls?
We did casting calls,
Hmm.
and it's actually kind of funny. So Jesse,
Hmm.
He was the first one.
Right.
So I put it out. I put out a casting call locally just to kind of see who was out there. Oh, and in LA, I think too,
Hmm.
just to kind of see who would come across. There was one guy, I forget who it was. That was very good down in LA, but we just couldn't do it because
Right.
the budget there just wasn't there, and we knew we were gonna have to shoot weekends, and I was just like, I just can't do it.
Right.
Uh, but Jesse, he applied locally and he
Hmm.
sent in a video recording of the entire first scene. So I without having to read it too. That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was blown away because like that's a 6 minute
Hmm.
something, 6 or 7 minute long monologue basically.
Right.
And for him to be able to do that in an audition
Hmm.
just blew me away.
Right.
And he had this arrogance about him
Hmm.
and I was just like, yeah, okay, this is the guy. So I ended up meeting him for coffee and we chatted about the movie, chatted about where I wanted the movie to go. He was, I think Jesse was very concerned about working with, somebody that didn't want this to be the best that it could be.
Right.
Sadly, there's a lot of independent filmmakers out there that, bite off more than they can chew
Hmm.
and get stuck in a predicament. And to be honest, halfway through shooting this movie, I thought that I did too. I
Right.
mean, there were moments at 3 o'clock in the morning when, we haven't slept for a week and a half or whatever it is. And I distinctly remember a moment where we took a break for lunch at
Hmm.
2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. And I had to go outside. I grabbed a
Right.
burger and I went outside and sat outside for a minute and started crying
Hmm.
because it was just like, when you're overworked
Oh yeah.
along with trying to be creative at the
Hmm.
same time, and you have all these people that are just looking at you, looking at you, looking at you. it is a lot of pressure, and I don't think people quite understand the amount of pressure that comes along with that. And but anyway, going back to it,
Sure.
and then we kept doing casting calls over and over and over again. I couldn't find the right character for Tim, and Barry was an interesting character because I had actually hit up a guy in Hollywood that I really liked a lot as an actor, and he's a younger actor, not younger, but
Right.
newer actor. A few years ago when we were first looking, and I can't remember his name to save my life right now, but he was in a Netflix show. Oh God, I forget the name of it. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But anyway, I really liked him as
Mm.
he was like a character unto himself, and he had kind of like curlyish hair and glasses, and he kind of was just dopey, and I just felt like he'd be perfect for it. And
Mhm.
anyway, I kept hitting him up, and we chatted about it a couple of times, and then his career started taking off a little bit, so it was that kind of went out the window.
Right.
So we kept looking. I mean, we looked for probably 6 months trying to find somebody. And one of my good friends, one of me and Courtney's really good
Mhm.
friends, Dustin, Courtney kept telling me, you should, he's a great actor. I mean, I've worked with him a ton in the past, and I just didn't see him in this role. I just
Mhm.
never did. I never saw him in the role. I thought he was too pretty for it, because he's honestly, like outside of the glasses and the hair and
Sure.
stuff like that, he's kind of a pretty boy. So I was like, I just didn't see it.
Mhm.
And Courtney's like, well, why don't one day we were doing a full casting call. We were bringing people in for a couple of the other roles for Bob and for Tracy and a couple other things. And Dustin was living down the street at the time, and somebody had canceled. So Courtney's like, well, why don't you just invite Dustin over to the reading or whatever. I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, all right, all right. Well, we'll invite him over. He comes over. I don't know if he wants me to tell this, but he's a little hungover,
Sure.
and it actually worked. So the hungoverness worked for the role because he was just so done with, like, he didn't want to do it. So when I asked him, I was like, hey, dude, do me a favor. Can you sit down with Jesse and just, because Jesse was there, and I was
Right.
like, can you sit down with Jesse and just, read a couple of lines? I want to keep Jesse kind of fresh.
Mhm.
And I didn't tell Dustin that he was flat out auditioning. And he just kind of rolled into the character a little
Mhm.
bit. And I was like, I looked at the second he read, I looked at Courtney and I was like, oh God, this is it. And I was like, and then I started giving him direction.
Sure.
I think at that point it hit him. Okay, I'm kind of auditioning for this thing now, and we're all friends, like
Sure.
close friends. So it's one of those weird moments.
Mhm.
And Dustin, I called him right when we were done. I called him and I was like, hey, dude, do you want this role or not? Like, yes, I love it. Let's do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
But the
Yeah.
character
So,
of Tim, though,
yeah.
Tommy is actually a really good friend of Courtney's, and that's how we
Sure.
found him.
Oh, cool. And what about the role for Bunny? Because
Mhm.
I, like I said, I was very fascinated, and I actually wanted to see more of this organization that Bunny ran and the Bunny character. It's herself. She only gets a small scene, but I'm just like, I want to see more of this group. you know?
I, it's between us,
Mhm.
well, and everybody else that knows me, I
Mhm.
love Bunny. I
Yeah.
love her character so much, and I honestly, it's always been in the back of my mind about writing a movie about her,
Hmm.
but something that doesn't connect with Sleeping Dogs at all. Like
Right.
I would want it to live on its own. Um, I just She was such a strong character,
Hmm.
and when she leaned down and oh, by the way, she had never smoked in her life. And so I'm trying to ask her to smoke. So they're outside trying to teach her how to smoke. It was hilarious. But she's a professional. I mean,
Hmm.
she doesn't do a lot of film. She does a lot of theater though.
Okay.
She's a professional actress in
Hmm.
theater and is amazing. And but when she leaned down and kissed Jesse, and the smoke, I don't know if you could tell, but like she also had smoke in her mouth.
Yeah.
She kissed him, and then the smoke came out, and I was just like, God, that's just awesome. And I just like how she commanded the scene. She
Hmm.
was just fantastic. But we found her through theater.
Hmm.
So Tony, who helped shoot the movie, he was one of the cinematographers in it. He knew her from theater
Hmm.
and pointed us in her direction because I knew I wanted an African American female.
Hmm.
I just I just loved it. I just loved the idea of it. I also really liked her not being kind of slummy. I
Hmm.
wanted her to be strong. I wanted her to run an organization, not, and run businesses and things like that. I like that old school mob mentality,
Hmm.
instead of in the gutter kind of mentality.
Well, yeah, that's what I liked about the character too, and that's why people may say, "Oh, "Wow, you keep bringing her up," but that's what I liked about her because when you allude, that in the beginning that Jeff owes her money and that, and you kind of expecting for lack of a better term, the kind of sultry kind of, she moves a little bit and she uses it, but then you meet Bunny, and you know, uh, it's a team. Is that how you pronounce
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
I
Uh,
think.
sh- yeah, and she commands it, and she's just like serious mob boss. Like she comes on the screen, and you're like, whatever you want, I will do. Uh, she doesn't even have to say anything, but yeah, and that's why I found that character really interesting because I think it bucked expectations of what you're used to seeing in a number of films, crime films like this when it's the female lead, the female lead of the organization. She's always played a little, uses a little sensual or flirts or something, plays with the guy in here. She's just like, I'm gonna kick your ass. no.
I, I've always loved strong female characters. If
Hmm.
you go back and you watch any of my shorts or anything like that,
Hmm.
or even read anything that I've ever written, I love strong female characters. I always have. Before it was, I'm going to say this, but like, I liked it before it was cool in
Right.
Hollywood to
Hmm.
like strong female characters, and I think it's because it's that unsuspecting person.
Hmm.
Especially back in the early '90s and stuff like that. I think Tarantino had a lot to do with that for me too. When you watch Kill Bill and things like that, I think that people judge him a lot for how he treats female characters on screen.
Hmm.
But I think that especially with the Hollywood one, the new one,
Oh
Once Upon a
yeah.
Time in Hollywood,
Hmm.
and what that end scene, what he does to those, is bad. But
Uh,
um,
I personally enjoyed how that. I know people got offended. I'm like, were you watching the rest of the film? I mean, I'm
yeah,
like, do you know what character that is that was in real life? I'm like, it was entertaining. I hate to say
oh,
it, but
totally.
yeah.
But I always liked not just what he did with female characters, but I
Hmm.
always liked what he did with just almost like the low level characters. So
Right.
like Tim
Yeah.
Roth, for instance, right? You would never picture Tim Roth,
Hmm.
Four Rooms Tim Roth in Reservoir Dogs the way that he is. Like
Right.
it. So and then in Pulp Fiction, the very beginning of Pulp Fiction too. Like I think that Tarantino takes these unwanted kind of characters
Hmm.
and makes them strong.
Right.
And at least that's my take on it. And I always liked that about any character. So
Hmm.
whether it's a female or whether it's just like the nerd that sat in the back of the classroom
Hmm.
writing his whole life and now he's rich and has to and you know whatever, because that was me.
Right.
I'm not rich by any means, but I mean, like,
Hmm.
I think I think it's powerful because it shows the everyday person to some degree.
It grounds them a little. I think it makes you sit there and go, you're watching a movie, but you could kind of see this person in real life.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like with a lot of the characters that you wrote here. Though I want to know the car with the horns. Where did you get the car with the horns? Did you have to attach them, or did you find that car?
So, funny thing. So I love iconic cars.
Sure.
I think cars in movies like are so underrated nowadays,
Hmm.
and I miss the days of the iconic car. Like
Hmm.
I just love it. But no, actually, one of our friends, Dan Barbeau, he's a funny guy. He's obsessed with like he loves Elvis. And you walk into his house, and there's just Elvis memorabilia everywhere, and it's really cool, really really cool guy, really really nice guy.
Yeah.
And he pulled up one day, and I got to paint this picture for you. So he pulls up one day and he's driving this Cadillac, right? And it's
Hmm.
got the horns on the front of it. And inside he's got this little Elvis wavy, the
Yeah.
little
Bobblehead.
bobble
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. and it's sitting on there. His license plate says Elvis One on it, and I fell in love with that car. I was like, this is an iconic car, and I had to have it. And I called him up one day, and I was like, hey, would you be okay with us using it a couple of days here and there? And he's like, well, just take it. So I had this car sitting at our house for like 3 months, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
It was leaking oil, leaking gas. I mean, this thing, I don't even know how it still ran, but so he gave it to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So his brother now owns this car, and I told him, I'm like, if he ever wants to get rid of it, you let me know, because I never want that thing gone, because now I want to like have it pop up in places, like just random places.
Put it in your own combined cinematic universe, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Why not?
Sure, why not? Yeah. I just found that car fascinating. When I saw that, I was like thinking a little bit of Boss Hog, angle
Yeah.
with it too. So it kind of brought back. Speaking of iconic cars, so yeah, I thought it really added something when I saw it. I just kind of I chuckled too. It was like, oh man. Now, for the financing, you mentioned you worked on a budget. Did you do crowdfunding for this at all, or was it just all financed, personal, or finding financiers for it?
So we tried to do crowdfunding,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work.
Right.
I tried hitting up marketing people that knew how to crowdfund the right way and stuff like that. My personal opinion on crowdfunding nowadays is I think the market's just saturated,
Sure.
especially for independent films that don't have anybody attached to it that's
Mm-hmm.
got any kind of big name. I think it's really hard to raise money. But we didn't do it.
Mm.
We weren't able to, so I don't know if it actually works or not. Um, I know I have friends that have gotten some money out of it,
Sure.
but it didn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up, so it was mostly me and Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
We dumped a lot of money into this thing, and then Tony came in and he put in a little bit of money. Well, now after post production, he actually helped the most part in post production.
Mm-hmm.
He really helped get it across the finish line where we needed it with sound and things like that. Um, because it probably wouldn't have gotten finished in post without him. Well,
Right.
truthfully. And then we had a couple of friends that gave us a few grand here and there to kind of just help with things. And then, yeah, and a lot of people work for free.
Yeah.
Uh, we'll never see a paycheck from it, and I know
Sure.
that. But it was really special to
Mm-hmm.
have all these people really believe in you, believe in the product, believe in what you're really trying to do, and give their all. I mean, they
Right.
really gave me their all for 2 months
Mm-hmm.
every weekend. And I can't crew and cast. I just feel like that's just amazing.
And I think people sometimes forget about the post production costs. They think of
Yeah,
the filming day costs. But just how long sometimes some things sit in post because you need the money for audio or finishing special effects. Which you did have some makeup effects in here, not a lot, but I
yeah.
thought the ones you did have in here were effective. Did you kind of make a limit too of was it more creative or budget to for limit gore or blood effects, makeup effects in here?
Both.
Yeah. Sure.
I think Nick did a great job
Hmm.
because he had to do all the tattoos on Jesse too every single day.
Oh, sure.
So he was taking 2 hours every single day just to get the tattoos on. And it was a mess because it was just time consuming for him.
Sure.
And Nick worked pretty much for free. I gave him a few $100
Hmm.
just for some stuff for
Hmm.
some just to be able to kind of replenish his just his
Right.
stuff that he works with or whatever. But he did everything. He did all the castings and stuff
Hmm.
like that for free, basically,
Wow.
and was there every day, every night with us. Couldn't thank him enough for that. He really knocked it out of the park for us. And then the final VFX stuff at the end, that was a good friend of mine that did that.
Hmm.
The fire effects,
Yeah.
and he did that for free as well. So again, it was just people just coming through and really, I think a lot of it is that me and Courtney and Tony, we're pretty respected in the local community.
Sure.
So and I do a lot with music too, and so a lot of the filmmakers here in town, there's a good portion of us that are also involved in the music side of things. So like some of us are musicians, and
Hmm.
or we're stagehands and all that kind of stuff. And so I was able to use some of those connections and stuff like that, and really just kind of get help from people, and it was really amazing.
Oh, that's awesome that you have that type of community there, because you do hear both sides of the track, so to speak, for indie filmmaking. Sometimes you hear that awful experiences where no one will help you, and then you have like what you have there, which is everybody seems to help each other out quite a bit.
It was funny actually though, because I think the Sacramento film scene in general is a
Hmm.
little weird. I'm not going to go to details about that, but
No,
it's just
that's yeah.
I think every mid-sized town
Hmm.
is a little funky anyway. That's from what I've heard from
Sure.
people. But I think that once it was in the can
Hmm.
and I got a good edit on it,
Right.
I started sharing it out with some people, and I think it started getting around that it did
Hmm.
look good. People didn't really know what to think because in Sacramento and a lot of other smaller mid-sized towns like this, there tends to be a lot of poor quality
Sure.
that comes out,
Hmm.
and then there's one or two here and there that come out that are good quality, but
Right.
you don't know the difference until you see it. So I think it started going around that it was looking good, that it sounded good, that it might make some waves.
Hmm.
So people started kind of coming up and helping, and
Sure.
you know, it is what it
it
is.
is. It is what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Now, this was your first feature, and you've done a number of shorts. Do you think doing a number of shorts before leading up to your feature kind of helped you make the
Oh yeah,
feature?
big time.
Yeah.
I think I've done a lot. I've done a bunch of shorts, but I
Hmm.
also work in the industry full time.
Sure.
So I do a lot of I do like commercial work and social
Hmm.
media type stuff and that kind of stuff. But with the shorts, I didn't go to school for this. I didn't go to
Hmm.
school to be a filmmaker. I honestly didn't have the money. I didn't want to get myself in $100,000 in debt to go to school because I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay it back. Like it was
Right.
just one of those things. So I said to myself, I always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I thought it wasn't in the cards for me.
Hmm.
And then about 12 years ago, I guess now, something like that, I met Jeff
Hmm.
Foley, who is also the other shooter on this one, and me and him banded together and we made some shorts. And he and a group that I worked with a lot before the feature, they just we all gravitated towards each other. They
Hmm.
really believed in what I really wanted to do, and that I wanted to build this weird crime kind of underbelly
Hmm.
thing, and they all just believed in it. But what came with that belief was good people that
Hmm.
knew what they were doing.
Sure.
And I firmly believe that no matter who you are, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, and you will learn from them. And I had on my
Hmm.
first short that I ever directed.
Hmm.
I didn't write it, and it never saw the light of day, and it never will. Just one, it's bad, and two, it was it we lost some of the footage is just lost.
Sure.
But who I met on that project,
Hmm.
so this guy Nelson that I met on that project, he's also a VFX guy, but he worked on Halloween. He
Oh.
worked on
Hmm.
yeah, he worked on Terminator 2.
Hmm.
He worked on a bunch of indie horrors and stuff like
Sure.
that down in Hollywood back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And he moved to Sacramento just to retire and hang
Hmm.
out and whatever. Older guy, incredibly nice guy, but he was totally interested in working with um, young filmmakers and
Right.
stuff like that locally, and
Hmm.
just wanted to help out here and there and have some fun. That's all he was in it for. But I learned how to make a shot list from him. I
Right.
learned, basics of filmmaking from him,
Hmm.
and sitting there on set going, I don't know what to do, but I knew what I wanted out of characters,
Hmm.
so I could direct them. I knew kind of what I wanted out of camera angles and things
Hmm.
like that, so I could direct that to some degree.
Hmm.
But it was the basics that they don't teach you that you can't learn, or that no, sorry, that you can't that you can learn that are not like innate abilities,
Right.
basically. Some people can direct, some people can't.
Hmm.
But then there's all this other background stuff that you need to learn.
Hmm.
And it's just amazing that the stuff that I was able to learn from people, and still to this day I'm learning. Like every time I'm on a set, I'm watching everybody,
Hmm.
who's doing what, how they're doing it. It might not be right. It might, but at least I have the ability to be able to say, okay, well, I like what they're doing. I don't like
Hmm.
what they're doing, and I can make my own decisions at
Sure.
that point. So I think, I just got lucky.
Well, I think it pays off quite well with your future, and so what do you have anything on the slate coming up? Are you taking a little breather from now that you have this one in the can and kind of getting it out there? What do you got coming up for
I
yourself?
wish I really, really wish I could tell you that there was something coming up,
Sure.
but right now there isn't.
Hmm.
And it's sad because, sleeping dogs really burned me out.
Sure. Hmm.
Especially within post production, it burned me out. And you
Hmm.
get to a point too where you're like, I don't even know if this is good anymore.
Sure.
So uh, I really just wasn't in a good headspace,
Hmm.
and my depression and stuff like that just wasn't really good for a
Right.
long time. And then I was waiting for the movie to release, waiting for it to release, waiting for it to release, and I was like, oh God, I hope we get good reviews and stuff like that. And then reviews started coming in, and they were
Hmm.
and they were for the most part good. So I
Hmm.
was like, or at least middle of the road, which
Sure.
is great because for any independent filmmaker to get a decent or good review is
Hmm.
so difficult because of the fact that people, your everyday viewer doesn't understand what we went through to make that, right?
Hmm.
Um, Joe Blow at home, sitting at home, is going to watch it and go, well, he might like it, he might not like it, but
Right.
he's going to, because it's independent, it's got its flaws.
Hmm.
So I didn't know what to expect, and so a lot of that was building up in my head too. But now, it makes me really happy to say that I've been able to write again.
Mm.
I haven't written anything in a long time,
Sure.
and about 3 weeks ago, I was sitting here and it just I had this idea
Hmm.
that I really really liked. I really
Hmm.
wanted to explore this world that I grew up in, actually,
Hmm.
which was when I was a kid. I watched a lot of Hitchcock,
Oh, sure.
and
Yeah. Hmm.
I I love Rear Window. Rear Window
Oh,
is
yeah.
just God. It's just I love that, and I, I love the suspense of him sitting
Hmm.
there in that wheelchair and not being able to move, not being able to get out of there, and and watching this world around him, and I really love that. So I'm kind of exploring that a little bit
Oh,
in it,
nice. Hmm.
but in a different way.
Hmm.
It's yeah. I'm not going to go into detail about
No,
it, but
no.
I'm,
Y-
I'm really enjoying writing it,
mhm.
and it makes me happy to really enjoy writing something again. Because I loved writing Sleeping Dogs. I really
Sure.
did. I really enjoyed writing that.
Hmm.
So I'm writing that, and then I'm actually just going to roll into another one. So I'm just going to keep writing because
Hmm.
basically what I'm doing is telling myself to write 5 to 6 pages a night. And now that I'm on a roll and I'm almost done with that one, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take it as is. I'm not going to do any edits to it at first. I'm going
Hmm.
to give it to Courtney and she can tear it apart. But at least I have something to start with.
Sure.
And then from
Hmm.
there, I've got 6 other features that I've written.
Oh, wow.
And I think I might go back
Hmm.
and look at 2 of them.
Hmm.
One of them I keep going back and forth writing every once in a while, and I really love it. It's a heist. It's another heist movie, but
Hmm.
it's more on the action side of things.
Sure.
Um, so who knows? But I'm hopeful that I'll be able to find more budget and get into something hopefully really
Nice.
soon.
So, yeah, I mean, you wore a number of hats for this film, but with some of those scripts, is it something that where you would maybe just for your own sanity, because you said you did go through a lot of trials with the feature, would it be what you could possibly give your script to someone else to direct, or are those all projects that I know it's a tough question, but that you might feel comfortable giving to someone else to direct, even though you wrote it?
I think it would depend on the project.
Sure.
There's a
Hmm.
few that I'm really close to,
Hmm.
and there's a few that I'm not. So,
Right.
yeah, you look at Tarantino too, and with True Romance,
Right.
I think it's a perfect example of just being able to break into the industry, and that gave him his break.
Hmm.
Um, Along with I forget what the other one was. Oh, it was the Natural Born Killers.
Right. Natural Born
Yeah.
Killers. Yeah. which
So,
that's a wild film. I,
uh,
I actually have the laser disc for that.
really?
Yeah, the collector's laser disc. It's a box about that thick. It's got 3 or 4 laser discs.
Oh man.
I'm a big retro media guy, so yeah, I don't know where I found that. I think that was given to me, or no, I found it at like a thrift store. Someone was selling it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love natural born killers, man. And I have a script that I started writing years ago that is
Mhm.
like I really wanted it to be my like homage to natural born killers, but I just can't get there. Like I just there's something about it that just keeps bugging me and I can't fix it. Like so I just kind of leave it there and just sits there and maybe one day I'll come back to it.
Well, Natural Born Killers, what I love about that is that it's one of those films where it's a wide release film, but you look at it, it's so different and indie in spirit that you're watching this going, I'm very impressed they wide released this movie.
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, Oliver Stone, it's amazing, like some of the stuff that he's done over the years,
Hmm.
you know, it's and how it varies
Right.
too. You know, you look at JFK and then you look at Natural Born Killers and it's like it's not even in the same world.
Yeah.
But then you look at Savages, which doesn't
Right.
get any love,
Hmm.
and I think Savages is amazing. I mean, I love everything about that movie, and it's such a shame that it doesn't get enough love. It really is, but that's something that I think older filmmakers get more leeway with being able to kind of do what they want. I mean, you look at Spielberg, dude.
Hmm.
He grew up, making suspenseful thrillers,
Yeah.
and even Jurassic Park.
Hmm.
I Jurassic Park is a suspenseful thriller for the most part.
Oh yeah, I always looked at Jurassic Park as I'm like people look at it, oh, family film. I'm like, it's a horror movie, man. Yeah, you look at it. I mean, you got dinosaurs ripping people apart and a severed arm. It's like, yeah, let's take the family to it. Yeah, because it's got dinosaurs in it.
Right?
More power to you. Actually, I liked Savages too quite a bit. I went to it because I like Oliver Stone as well, and it surprised me. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a decent film, quite a bit. Kubrick's kind of like that too. He's got a bad reputation, but he's got the kind of indie spirit as well.
Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned Hitchcock. You like Hitchcock. I think people forget that Hitchcock was, the way he approached his films, like you mentioned, like with Rear Window, they're kind of indie film approaches. I mean, Psycho was actually a low budget indie film. Rear Window's all in one location, just about. I mean, is Hitchcock? You mentioned you watched it a lot as a kid. Did he have some influences for some of your writing too?
Oh, definitely. I
Hmm.
think I loved horror growing up too.
Sure.
So I mean, I think all my influences have kind of influenced me now,
Hmm.
which makes sense. But I loved horror. I loved the whole world of Halloween too when I was a kid. And but Hitchcock just I grew up with so my dad watched a lot of black and white movies and a lot of
Sure.
black and white stuff, and I grew up around
Hmm.
noir. And then and I grew up watching the Alfred Hitchcock show,
Right.
um,
Hmm.
and a lot of Twilight Zone, a ton of Twilight Zone. So I think all of that I'm
Hmm.
sure all of it has really
Right.
pushed me to be the writer that I am today, for sure, definitely.
And it's great to hear that because I know some people out there nowadays, especially in the film culture we have, well, the YouTube reviewiverse, as I call it as well. Some people like, well, I don't watch anything past 2000. I'm like, you're missing out on, because you watch. We did 8 weeks of Hitchcock on our podcast,
Oh, nice.
and so we watched 8 Hitchcock films. I just picked them because I knew Psycho is one of my all-time favorite films, but
Yeah.
I'd watched Birds, but not some of the other ones. And so we watched Rope, and if you watch, it's like you watch that film, you're like, I see this filmmaker and this filmmaker and this filmmaker in this film that is trying to give you the one take feel.
Hmm.
And I think people lose something if they don't watch the old films.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, definitely.
mhm.
I mean, not Coppola or Spielberg, but I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now,
Mhm.
but he did Scarface.
Right.
Uh, oh, why am I skipping my mind right now?
It just blanked
Uh,
on me too. We
De Palma.
failed. Yeah, De Palma. Thank you. We were just talking about him the other day. Sorry, we failed as film lovers. Oh damn it, no. Yeah, De Palma.
But he did so many movies,
Hmm.
and people don't even realize how many he did because all of his movies were a major flop for the most part in the theaters. So if you watch, oh god, what is it? The Double Identity one.
Oh, Raising Cain.
Yes, Raising Cain,
Yeah.
and it's another one too. But if you watch the documentary about De Palma,
Hmm.
he talks about how he shot these movies in his house because nobody would give him budget anymore. So he was calling his friends to come and be in the movie, and and then he was shooting in his own house and just
Sure.
dressing the house to look different. And I'm like, God, I love this because it's just to think about a guy that made, you grew up watching
Oh
Scarface and
yeah.
and those types of movies, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
The fact that he was able to keep that
Hmm.
that love of just making films is amazing. And I
Yeah.
think that bigger directors and older directors like that, there's a lot to learn. There's a ton to learn.
Yeah, we actually talked about De Palma recently. Snake Eyes, we just talked about,
Yeah,
which is just a wild film. I'm like, you watch
yeah,
it, you're like, and not just because you've got Hyper Cage in it, or as I call him, Cocaine Cage, but because he's so Nicolas Cage in that film. But
yeah.
that's a wild movie too. And De Palma for me, Raising Cain was my first film where I realized it was a De Palma film because when I was younger, and then I watch back and go, oh no, wait, he's done this film and this film. Oh, he's done all these films I love. But
Yeah.
when I was younger, you don't really pay attention of who it is unless if you're in the '80s. Oh, that's a Spielberg film or whatever. But some of the quite lesser known ones, you realize, oh, I've liked his work for a long time. I didn't even realize it was him.
Well, I think there's also an access thing
Hmm.
going on too, right? Where back in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, we didn't have access to a lot of these titles. You
Right.
had to wait for it to come on TV or pay per view or HBO or whatever, what have you, because even Blockbuster or wherever you were renting movies from, a lot of that stuff wasn't there either. So
Hmm.
it was just like an access thing. Where now it's like you have it at the touch of your hands. I can go online and I can say, okay, well, show me every Brian De Palma movie, and I can have a field day watching every single Brian De Palma movie, or realize that he's got 30 something movies that he made, and I think it's a really huge thing because I was telling somebody the other day, they were asking me what my influences were,
Hmm.
and I went down the road of the
Right.
Tarantinos, and Spielberg was a massive influence on me as a kid, and I think a lot of that is because of the access.
Right.
And
Hmm.
you went to the theater, you saw big movies. You didn't see, you didn't. I don't even remember if Pulp Fiction was released wide. Like
Right.
I just don't remember. You just didn't see it in theaters.
Hmm.
You saw Jurassic Parks and you saw Twisters and you saw that kind of stuff. But
Well, and you mentioned Blockbuster. I mean, Blockbuster would have 100 copies of Jurassic Park, and then they'd
yeah,
have they'd have their side piece or whatever of the on your way to the big wall of new releases, you'd have the smaller stuff. You kind of had to go to the mom and pop stuff to find that more second tier director or whatever that are well known but not the explosive, everybody knows them. You
yeah.
kind of go to the small town, the mom and pop rental place and go, yo, man, you got any of that De Palma there? You know?
Yeah, there was this little store. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia,
Sure.
and there was a little tiny like corner store or whatever right across
Hmm.
the street, and they had just a section. So it was like a deli and a bunch of other stuff that they would sell there, and they had this little tiny section. I mean, I'm talking like a wall, like a small wall, and he would have the weirdest titles in there, but never anything new.
Hmm.
Everything was always old, and that's where I ended up watching a lot of stuff, a lot of weird stuff, like.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever seen like there's this sci-fi movie that came out back in like the early 90s called Mosquito.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know Mosquito. Yeah.
It's not good, but but it was there and I watched
Yeah.
that's how I watched it, or like I Married the Mob and those
Yeah.
types of movies. Like he just had these obscure titles. But the funny thing is that all those movies
Hmm.
are still in my head,
Right.
and I can take from that. I can
Hmm.
take from those experiences, you know. And as a writer, that's what you do. You take from experiences, and you take from everything and everybody around you, and you know all the movies you've watched over the years or whatever it is. And
Right.
you know, it's just funny.
But you also try to make it your own. It felt like you did
Yeah.
with you had the spirit, but I never felt like you were, as people would say, ripping off or homage, which is a whole nother discussion of which is which. Which
Yeah.
you have the spirit here, but it's still your own. Is that a little tough to do because you have those movies that influenced you so much to not just kind of replicate that?
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
You know, I did a short a long time ago now. I think it was about 10 years ago called The Long Slow Burn.
Sure.
And I love that script. It's a 30-page short script that I should have never done as a short. I should have written it into a feature. Um, and I bit off way more than I could chew.
Sure.
It was my first major short film.
Hmm.
And it's got good moments. I really love the characters of it, but it was very, very, very much like Drive,
Right.
and it. I felt like if I went down that road of making it into a feature, that I probably would have just straight up stolen some of that stuff.
Sure.
And I want to be my own filmmaker. I
Hmm.
want to be able to show the world that one that I'm influenced all over the place too.
Hmm.
Like, you know, I made mention of it earlier, but like De Palma, for instance, made movies that he wanted to make.
Right.
He made, you know, Mission Impossible and things that were different. And you know, he jumped around. He made action films, and then he made noir films, and then he made, you know, thrillers and almost horror type stuff. And I love that
Hmm.
because, you know, I want to do that. I want to
Right.
make a coming of age movie one day, and I want to make a horror movie, and I want to, you know,
Sure.
do all these things. I think it's special and it's important, but I want
Hmm.
to be my own, and I want to stand out. I want to stand out in a crowd, basically.
Sure. Nice. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here. So let people know, is Sleeping Dog, Where Sleeping Dogs Lie, is that out now for public consumption yet, or is it still making the festival circuit? Go ahead, you're licensed to shill away of where they can find your feature film.
Awesome. Right now it's on Prime. It's on
Hmm.
Amazon Prime. It's on iTunes and Vudu and Fandango now and Xbox and Google Play. Um, it's everywhere but Netflix and Hulu, pretty much. Uh,
That's not necessarily a bad thing at this point.
no. Uh, I love. Here's the funny thing is I
Mhm.
love what Hulu's doing over
Sure.
there. I love the quality of the
Hmm.
films they're picking up, wherever they're getting them from, or the ones that they're producing. I really like what they're doing over there. But yeah, so right now that's where it's living.
Hmm.
It's still up for rent or to buy, but that's going to end in September. I forget the
Okay.
exact date. I think it's September 11th or 12th or something like that,
Hmm.
where it will switch over to just regular streaming.
Okay. Hmm.
So if you have those services, you can stream it. But as far as I know, I think the distribution company,
Hmm.
the Orchard, they are currently trying to get it on other platforms too.
Nice.
So we'll kind of see where it ends up. But right now, it's it's definitely
Awesome.
readily available on everywhere you
Awesome.
probably go, except for Netflix and
Sure.
Hulu.
And do you have a site or somewhere where people could go to follow up and keep up to date on the projects you got coming up?
Yeah. So the movie itself is where sleeping dogs lie movie.com. But then Burn Baby Burn Films
Hmm.
is my production company. That's not going away anytime soon, and we're making updates to it. Getting ready to make some major updates to it, and hopefully drive forward into the future and
Awesome.
make some more Burn Baby Burn stuff.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and I hope this got a wet people's whistle out there to check out Where Sleeping Dogs Lie, out now, as you said, on the streaming platforms. And yeah, I think we'll call it a night. It's been a pleasure talking to you, sir. And your next film, I'll look forward to seeing it, and maybe we get a chance to talk again.
Oh, that would be awesome, man! I really appreciate everything
Awesome.
you've done, and
Uh,
really happy you enjoyed the movie.
You bet. Yeah, I always like these when doing indie films, the surprise films that you watch them and you're like, oh, this is decent, and then you get one that kind of like, wow, this one really struck me because of the genre and stuff it was in. So yeah, I hope it has continued success.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah. And so, folks, we're going to end it here. Check it out. I'll put links in the page for this interview on our website where you can find more out about it. And so we'll just say good night, everyone.